Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Whitaker, and it's great to have you here with us today. And whether you're watching on YouTube or listening as you walk the dog or driving the car, running on the treadmill, or whatever you're doing, I just want to start by saying thank you for being a listener. Our podcast is growing and we need your help to continue growing because we want to get to help as many people as possible. So if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, then give us a 5-star review and a follow. And that'd be very kind of you and much appreciated. So with all that said, on with today's episode. Over the last 20 years, there has been a significant shift in the way that the hairdressing industry works, driven by changes and technology combined with social media and generational changes, and hairdressers wanting more flexibility, more freedom and more control over when and how they work has meant that new business models have emerged. Particularly in the United States, a Salon Suite or Salon Studio has radically changed how the industry operates, and there's no going back. And as a result, the traditional commission-based or employee-employer-based business model has been dramatically impacted and is continuing to evolve in order to meet the demands of today's changing workforce. Now, my guest on today's podcast is a returning guest, Eric Taylor, the founder of the incredibly successful Salon Republic, which is, in my opinion, the best Salon Suite or Salon Studio business model that there is in the industry today. In today's podcast, we will talk about how the Salon Suite model continues to evolve and adapt, what you need to do to succeed as an independent business of one, and the challenges that all suites and small business owners face today. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Eric Taylor.
How you doing, Anthony? Good to see you.
I'm very good. Do you know what? When we last did this, well, I was checking through the back catalogue. I thought I'd had you on the podcast twice, but okay. I've only had you on once. And
oh my God, I'm insulted.
My apologies, because it was episode 20 and wow. I'm now up at, I think this is something like 260.
Oh my God.
I know I've been on yours since then, so maybe that's, where I'm a bit confused. But we last spoke in 2019. So
no way.
Yeah, an awful lot in the world has changed since then. But I'm just going to preface this by saying that when we last spoke, I was just having a look at our notes on it. 2019, you had 21 locations for Salon Republic, and you had a total of 2,000 individual suites. So I thought that's a pretty good place to start. Here we are now. It's 2024. 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, since we last spoke. So give us an update on how Salon Republic has expanded in the last 5 years. Obviously, there was this minor blip.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll leave that to you as to whether you mention it or not. So, over to you. Just give us an update on how things are going.
Well, COVID was a disaster. I like that whether I mention it or not. I can talk as long as you want me to, or not at all about COVID. Obviously, it was very bad. It was bad for all the listeners. Maybe we don't need to go into it, but I would say bridging the gap between 2019 and where we are now, 2024. We now let's see. In the next couple months, we'll have about 30 locations. I think 29 locations, Salon Republic locations. I don't regularly keep tabs on how many beauty professionals we have, but it's going to be more than 2,000. And we're trying to grow, in a kind of a calm way that makes sense for us. We're not a big company. I think for this industry, sometimes people think of us as this huge company. We're not that big of a company. We've got like 50 employees. I know that sounds like a lot, but a lot of those are salon managers. They're on site in the salons full time. Here in the office, which is in the LA area, we've on some days we have like 3 people here. It's some days we have maybe 10 max. So it's not a big company, but we're doing the best we can to continue to, run the salons that have been there for going on 24 years now, and grow new salons that can be really, really good for the next 24 years.
Fantastic. Well, I know that COVID knocked a lot of people around. I know that you got heavily involved in it politically as well. You became a
Yes.
real voice for the industry. It's not something I want to dwell on a lot now. It's in the rear view mirror. But I think you did a fantastic job of
Thank you.
representing the industry, obviously, particularly in California, where you're based. And I know that in the US, it was very sort of state centric as to how it was handled. And you were certainly banging the drum big time for California. So,
Yep.
we don't need to harp on about COVID anymore, except to say that let's just hope it doesn't come back, or any variation on it doesn't come back to haunt us. Fingers
Indeed.
crossed. So, aside from you and your business, I really want to talk about the suite industry. I know you actually don't like to call them suites; you prefer to call them studios. So
Correct.
I'll probably dip in and out of
Doesn't matter.
that.
You can call it. Everybody calls them suites. That's totally fine.
Yeah, yeah, okay, right, okay. So, what is an update on, from your perspective, as to how the suite industry has evolved? Because I can't remember. Well, I can remember when we spoke. It was 2019. And even then, it was very much a California based thing that was gradually rolling across the country. Well, it's certainly reached the East Coast now. It's everywhere. It's a global thing.
Mhm.
Not the same. It's different in different countries. But what would be your sort of general state of the nation, so to speak, on what has happened to the salon suite industry today, obviously, particularly in America?
Sure. So I would boil it down like this, especially maybe considering the time frame of 2019 to now, because that is a time frame in which there have been a lot of changes within the salon studio industry. Some of these changes may not be visible to the beauty professionals. Some of this stuff is kind of behind the scenes, but I would boil it down like this. In the last 5 years, there has been a transition from kind of founder ownership, founder led, to now institutionally led, mostly private equity type ownership and led. Private equity is basically a company that collects money from a lot of investors and then invests it in companies. They will buy companies. Sometimes they buy a little bit of a company, sometimes they buy the whole company or any variation in between. And then they typically put some sort of professional management in place to then grow the business, with the goal of selling the business after some period of time. Oftentimes it's 3 to 7 years, depending on the private equity firm. So this is not strange at all. It's actually very natural. And I think it kind of shows the maturity of the salon studio concept and business as it's kind of grown up over the last 20. Well, I mean, it's really started about 1990-ish. Those were the very early locations, many of which are still there. It started in Dallas, and I'm from Dallas. And, my story kind of begins actually at the beginning of the studio concepts, the studio concept, from its kind of initial founding by a guy named Keith Clark, who became my mentor. And he ran salons, very successfully, and all of his beauty professionals very happy for many, many years. I learned from him around 2000. Well, let's see, late 90s, and then 2000 is when I started Salon Republic in LA. But getting back to most recently, the concept has kind of matured. And so I would say of the big brands, let's call them Sola, Phoenix, My Salon Suite. Maybe there's some others in there, but I guess those are the big ones. I don't think any of them are founder-led anymore. I think they're all private equity owned. They're all franchised. And the franchising element, introducing that to the conversation here, that there's a big difference between a franchise business and a corporate owned business. So Salon Republic, I oftentimes have to explain, we're very different because we don't franchise. So all the locations that we have are run by us. Our business is not going out and finding a pensioner or a retiree who has $500,000 in savings and convincing this individual to open a salon and run it. Our business is to open a Salon Republic in the way that we think it's best and the way that has been making our beauty professionals happiest for all the years that we've been doing it, and to keep doing that and keep trying to improve them. I've never been a big fan of the franchise model because I think I've always thought that the quality of the salon is really just the quality of all the people who are working in it. So I would like to have control over making sure we get the highest quality people working in the salon. I feel like if we were to franchise Salon Republics, it would be hard to convince that one guy who's running that, one location in XYZ town, really hard to get him to carry on kind of the same philosophy, because he or she's going to do whatever is best for his or her pocketbook in the moment. That's just what I've seen.
Yeah.
So, here we are. There's a lot of Solas, there's a lot of Phoenixes, there's a lot of My Salon Suites run by franchisees. Some of the franchisees do a good job. Some of the franchisees do a bad job. The type of the model that's proliferated is the kind where you have a smaller location. You got about 20 to 30 studios, and there's no actual salon employee present. That's a vast majority of the salon suites out there. And then this is where I get into differentiating Salon Republic. I've always thought that it's much better to have a manager on site. It's better to have a larger location. It's better to have a reception area with a beautiful desk, because we can then offer things like products. We have a beauty supply in all of our salons. Well, the vast majority of our salons. We have a few that don't have it because they're smaller locations. But in most of our salons, we have a beauty supply where we carry about 100 brands, and we sell those brands wholesale to our beauty professionals. We offer towels for free, for our beauty professionals. We'll just walk down the hall, grab a bunch of towels, and then they can throw those towels in a bin at the end of the day. They don't have to wash their own towels, and various things like that. So we can offer things that the other brands don't offer. And I think that that's much, much better. I would much rather have a handful of locations that are very high quality than 800 locations that are just kind of moderate in quality.
Yeah. Okay. How many suite organizations do you think there are in the US? I know you mentioned the big ones. Any idea? It was interesting how you talked about how now most of them are owned by sort of private equity or franchised out, etc. Has that been? Do you have any idea as to how many there would be in total?
Well, you've got, anytime you look at something like this, you have a long tail, right? So if you graph it out, you've got a few who have a lot of locations, and then that line goes down quickly, and then you have a bunch of brands that just have one or two locations, and that's called the long tail. So there's, I wouldn't be surprised if there were maybe 100 brands out there, and I would say maybe 10%. I would say maybe 10 of those have more than 10 locations.
Okay, and Sola being the biggest one, is it?
Sola has the most locations. Yeah,
right.
The most locations, and I think the most beauty professionals. Although it's different. One location is not the same from one brand to another. Like one Soul is not the same as one Salon Republic, because
Sure. Yeah.
some of our locations are 30,000 square feet and we have
Yeah.
200 people in there.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the salon suites out there have 25 people
Got
working
it.
in
Yeah.
there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Well, I
So
remember when you gave me a tour of
Mhm.
your biggest location, I think it was like 195. It was just, that's probably the one
Mhm.
you just are talking about with
Yes.
30,000 square feet. I mean,
Yeah.
it was very, very impressive. And I said in the
Thank you.
intro that I think that Salon Republic do the studio or suite business model better than anybody else.
Thank you.
And a lot of that is because of you, because I know you're not a hairdresser, but you may as well be a hairdresser. You certainly understand hairdressing and hairdressers and the client experience and all that. And, with what you were talking about with all these other, private equity people getting into it, I think a lot of them saw it as a real estate play, simply as a way to make money. And
Sure.
obviously, you've got a business and it's about making money, but it's always been about a lot more than that for you. And I will just remind the audience that episode 20 that you and I did in 2019, you spoke a lot in that about your early beginnings. And I'd highly recommend people that are interested in finding out more about it to listen to that as well, so that we don't have to, to go over too much of that now, because it was a really, interesting story as to how you got started.
Thank you.
With the size of the industry now, the amount of people that jumped on the bandwagon, as you've said, franchised and, 20, 25 units, no manager, it's just, build it and they will come. Has it plateaued in the US, do you think? Or is there still a
Hmm.
lot of scope to keep rolling?
Well, I think there's a lot of scope to keep rolling. I mean, I keep looking at different markets, and there's two different ways to look at it. So when you ask that question, I have one side of my brain that thinks, wow, there's so many Solas and there's so many Phoenixes or whatever, and it feels like it's gotten to a maximum. And then the other side of my brain is the one that looks at different markets every day. When I come to the office, we have a real estate group here in the office of like 2 people, and they bring different cities to me and different neighborhoods to me, and they're like, do you think this would work? Do you think the hairstylist here would like a Salon Republic? And so I do spend a lot of time looking around, and there's still a lot of cities and a lot of towns that don't have this type of workplace available to the beauty professionals. So,
Hmm.
I I think I probably lean towards the second part of my brain that's thinking like, gosh, there's still a lot of beauty professionals who don't have all of the options
Mm-hmm.
for a workplace. You know, they
Okay.
they might there might they let's say they live in whatever XYZ town, right? And they'll have, let's say, 7 salons to choose from. And of those 7 salons, depending on the state, half will be booth rental, kind of a standard setup booth rental salon, and then half will be kind of a commission. There might be some hybrids in there, and
Mm.
some of the salons change. They vacillate between employee and rental, just depending on what the owner's feeling, and that's it. And so my entire career has been, let's bring a different option to the beauty professionals in this town. And, some might like a little bit more freedom. Some might like to have their own studio, and let's try it.
Yeah. What unique challenges does the suite studio industry have? When we spoke 5 years ago, it wasn't the Wild West, but do you know what I mean? It was
Mm-hmm.
a huge growth stage.
Mm-hmm.
With any growth stage, and maybe it's what we've already spoken about, where you said that there's a lot of people that are now in it that are just investors, and it's get in there and build it up, and 3 to 5 years later you sell it, you get out, you take your money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm asking you: is that the or a big challenge that the industry's having? Is it that it's potentially overbuilt, or that people are getting into it for the wrong reason? Because it's a different business to a commission-based salon. So I'm curious about what are some of the challenges that suite owners everywhere might be having.
So a couple different ways I can answer this question. Well, first of all, I don't think it's overbuilt, because as we look around, especially in markets far afield from where we are on the West Coast, it seems like a vast majority of the studio salons are well occupied. Yeah, not all of them, of course, but most of them are very well occupied. And depending on the geography, right?
Sure.
Like there's some towns where there's more of them, and so they're going to be less. But still, even the ones that are lower in occupancies are still doing pretty well. So to answer your question directly, I would say that the difficulties right now are very similar to the difficulties that a lot of businesses are having that are brick and mortar oriented businesses. So it's inflationary challenges. Construction costs have gone absolutely haywire since COVID. That is related to labor. Labor has become much more expensive, and materials have become much more expensive. Now that's coming down slowly. For example, lumber. Okay. Now we don't build with lumber; we build with metal. But a lot of our competition builds with lumber, and lumber prices skyrocketed. I think multiples of what it was before COVID to after COVID. So just you have to buy a lot of lumber, and so it gets much more expensive to build a location. Also, there's been inflationary pressures on the cost of real estate. Cost of real estate has gone bonkers. I mean, for all the talk of the Amazon effect and people are buying things online, and the clothing stores can't survive anymore. We are experiencing the lowest ever vacancy rate for retail real estate. It's something, I mean, depending on the geography, it's 2, 3, 4%. I mean, Orange County, California is like 1.5% vacancy, which is unheard of. If you want to open a retailer in Orange County, California, you're going to pay through your nose for the space to the landlord. And there's a lot of reasons for that, for Orange County, but nationally we have the lowest ever vacancy rate for retail. So when it comes to finding a good space, being able to get it for an affordable price, building out a high quality salon, and charging an affordable price for a studio to the hairdressers so they can be happy and successful for years and years, that's become harder.
Okay. Finely balanced. Yeah. Okay. So now talk about that question from the perspective of the stylist. What are some of the challenges that what I was going to ask you actually was, and it's sort of the same question, but it's coming at it from a different way. I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to someone wanting to go into a studio? Like, you've seen a lot come and a lot go for all sorts of different reasons. You obviously can identify the right people for it. And you can obviously identify other people and you go, do you know what? This isn't going to work for you. And if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't obviously work for you, because you don't want people, coming and going all the time. You want people that are going to be a fit. So talk to us about it from that perspective. Like, what advice would you give someone who was thinking about going independent and working in a studio or a suite by themselves to make a success of it?
My answer is going to sound kind of obvious, but there's no getting around it. Do you have clients who come back to you regularly, that provide you a good business? And now that's a very simple thing to say. Underneath that is all the complexity of what you talk about all the time and what you've built a career on. And what I talk about on the Hair Game podcast is, what are the elements to build a great book of business? everything that goes along with that, right? I mean, we can talk for, I mean, we have, you've talked for a few hundred episodes and the same. So it boils down to, do you have a good book of business? That's the bottom line. Now, other than that, I'm trying to give you a little bit more, because I hate to be so simplistic, but do you like running your business, in your personal way? I'm trying to draw a distinction between somebody who loves a commission kind of employment situation and somebody who loves an independent situation. Some people want control over what they're doing. Some people want less control over what they're doing. I think it kind of boils down to that. Now, going into the initial part of your question, as far as challenges, what challenges are beauty professionals having in an independent type situation, studios or even booth rental? It's similar. I think the challenges are actually very similar to the challenges that a lot of businesses have been having, which are inflationary related. We've been in an environment where inflation was very high. It's still too high. It's still in the 3 to 4 neighborhood. In the United States, and I know, internationally, it's very much the same, so not much difference there. But the independent beauty professional, how well has that individual raised prices? How well have they been balancing the customer service, the needs of their clients, with slowly but surely increasing their prices so that they're not making less money to put in their own bank account year after year?
Yeah.
I would say that's been the number one challenge.
Okay.
And again, not a surprise. I mean, other industries has been worse, restaurants, things like that.
Yeah. What are some of the, and that's probably one of them, common mistakes that, although at the beginning you look at someone and you go, yeah, you'll be a fit. They've got the book of clients and they've got a good following and they're all over their social media and all that sort of stuff. But then they start, and then bit by bit, you see them sliding downhill. What are some of the mistakes that you see new suite owners make? I mean, you just alluded to the pricing thing. Is that would, to me, probably be one of them, that they don't have the courage or the understanding. Actually, it could go either way here. They don't have the courage or the understanding to know that they need to put their price up, or the social media meme that was driving everybody mad, charge your worth, that made other people go to the other extreme and just go off the deep end because I'm worth it, and then find out that actually the client will decide whether you're worth it or not, and an awful lot of them have decided that you're not. So talk to us about that, because when people do go independent and they do have a suite or a studio, they're their own boss, they're their own business, and they've got to navigate all that sort of stuff like pricing and budgeting, etc. So I don't want to answer the question for you, but I'm just trying to find out, what are some of the mistakes that people make?
Yeah. So I would say generally first, and then I'll go into the pricing. Generally, if they, so again, with your question, they have a good book of business. They come into an independent situation and they start running their business poorly. I mean, they're late to their appointments, right? They don't have the product that they need to use on their client, so they try to make it work with another product, and they end up providing a service that their client doesn't like. All the different things. They start talking about politics in a very zealous way, as our clients are in the chair. Yeah. All those little, it's like the opposite version of all the things that you and I both try to put out there. It's doing the opposite of that, is how they lose their clients. Now, pricing has been a big one in the last few years, and you're absolutely right. You use the word balance. That absolutely is a balance. I initially started with the keeping upward pressure on your prices because I think that's probably maybe the majority. There's absolutely a percentage of people, as you referred to, who have, in quotes here for the listeners, felt like charging their worth and they were wrong. They maybe increased their prices too much. And then what you have to consider is the same inflationary pressures on the broader general public, right? The clients. Clients are experiencing the same inflationary pressures that all the businesses have, as well as independent hairstylists and commission salons, all experiencing the same inflationary pressures. So there are going to be some clients who maybe are, their budgets have been decimated with the higher grocery prices, right? I mean, a favorite thing that I like to quote is, how the hell did my deodorant go from $3.50 at Target to like $9? I don't know if I can curse. Can I curse on your podcast?
Of course you can, yeah.
Like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, in this is it's one of those little things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone. I don't think this is just my experience. When I go and I buy my deodorant, it's the same deodorant. How did it almost triple in price in the last 3 years? Right? And there's other examples. I mean, I love my macchiato. I love my espresso in the afternoon. Yeah. I was paying $2.75 in 2019, and this morning I paid $6.75 for the same thing.
Wow!
Right? So this is what everyone is experiencing in the economy. Everyone's clients are experiencing the same thing. So their budgets are going to be constricted depending on how they're managing themselves, right? I mean, if maybe there's some people who, of course, have been getting commensurate raises at work, and there's some people who aren't, who haven't. So they're going to be more constricted. So those clients are going to be more sensitive to price increases, and most likely the ones who are going to fall away, especially if the hairstylist who is drastically increasing their prices is going overboard.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was watching a video tour that on your Instagram feed. This was a few months ago now. It was a new salon that was opening. I don't know which one it was now. It had a beautiful courtyard, like a balcony area. I don't know.
Yes, that's West Hollywood, our second West Hollywood
right,
location.
Okay. It looked fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
But
just opened yesterday.
Oh, did it? Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, as they were doing the tour, they were sort of introducing you to different people that were in suites. Some of them were painting it out and, putting up shelves and, settling in to their new space. And I was sort of watching it, and I was not consciously, but I was aware that I was looking at these people and going, where did you come from? And where did you come from? Do you know what I mean? Like this one has come straight from beauty school. This one has come straight from a commission-based salon. They built up a book and now they want to do this, And then there was a couple of guys and they were older. And I know in my head that I thought to myself, I wonder if these were previous salon owners with staff who just went, I can't do this anymore. Because I often meet people like that in a coaching situation where, they reach a point where if you own a commission-based salon and you employ staff, you are going to have times where people leave. And when you're, in your 30s, your 40s, even your 50s, it's like roll up your sleeves, get back in there and rebuild. But you reach a point, and it's a different time for different people, where they go, I can't do this anymore. And I just remember looking at this guy or two guys, whatever it was, and thinking, I wonder if that is them. I wonder if they've gone, do you know what? If you can't beat them, I'm going to join, sort of thing. I just want to have something small and manageable that's like cool and a great location, beautifully set out, as you said, laundry's done, inventory, dispensaries down the hall. I mean, it's a great sort of setup. So what I'm asking you is this: is there a stereotype of people?
Well, I would say no longer is there a stereotype. I think
Okay.
back to the mid 2000 aughts, I think we call it, right? Like the 2000 to 2010. And I think there was more of a stereotype back then. Now there is definitely not a stereotype anymore. We have people who are the hairdressers that I think we all immediately think of. Maybe they were at a commission salon and they were paying X amount to the salon, and then they move to the studio and they have a great book of business and they increase their income. Okay. And then there's the booth rental lady who's been in a booth rental salon very successfully for years, and the owner has kind of fallen off the deep end or whatever, or moved, and the place is not being managed properly anymore. Bathrooms are dirty. The music's horrible, all that. And then she comes over and gets her own studio and controls her environment. There is very much, especially in the last, call it 5 to 10 years, the salon owner who either moves themselves only to their studio or moves the whole salon into a large studio.
Well, that was going to
And
be the next thing I asked you. So sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
no, we absolutely have, in every location, we have, let's call it on average, 1 or 2 very large studios. Typically we'll take maybe 4 or 5 in line, and we'll just pop the walls out. I say pop the walls out, but nowadays to take a wall down is like $2,000. It makes no sense. But we pop the walls out, and we give them this space, and they basically move all their furniture, and they move only the hairstylists that they want. Sometimes they scuttle some who are maybe troublemakers, but they'll bring over the great hairdressers, and they run their salon in our environment. And they might want a little more clarity or consistency on the rent going out a few years, because oftentimes, and we give that to them, because oftentimes the reason they moved over is because the landlord of their previous location, where they may have been for whatever, 5 or 10 years, just popped the rent up double. And this goes back to what I was saying before, where vacancy rates are so low, landlords are charging a lot of money for spaces. And so if somebody rented a salon, maybe 1,000, 1,500 square foot salon 10 years ago, and their rent and their lease is expiring, maybe that was let's call it a $10,000 a month that they were paying before. That could be $25,000 a month. And there are few businesses that can withstand that kind of increase.
Yeah, I mean, with all these things, I mean, from the build out you talked about before to, the price of you called it lumber. I think most people listening to this will probably call it timber.
Timber. I like that.
So, I'd never realized that a lumber seems to be an American. I think Canadians say it as well, don't they?
You're probably right.
Yeah, I think Americans, Canadians. I don't know the rest of the English speaking world will go, what the hell does he mean when he's talking about lumber? I think I think for them it's timber, right? Anyway, there was something I was going to ask you about as you were saying that, because when I had a tour with you around the Salon Republic in West Hollywood, there was one of your suites there that had like 5 chairs in it or something, and it was like a mini salon. Whereas most of them were small room, I don't know how many square feet, chair, mirror, shampoo basin, business unit of 1.
Right.
And so I was surprised to see, others, as you've just said, you pop the wall out, there's, 5 or 6 people that can be working in there on different shifts, etc.
Yeah.
One of the things that we spoke about before a previous conversation was how some people are making that journey from a traditional commission-based salon. They're going into a suite to see, can I do this? Can I run my own business? And the answer often turns into yes, and they're doing well at it. And so the question I'm asking you is, do some of them then go, do you know what? It's time for me to spread my wings and leave a Salon Suite environment and go and open up a freestanding salon elsewhere and employ staff and build a commission-based salon. Are
Yes.
you seeing much of that sort of, migration of people that do get those skills together and want to take that next step?
Yes, we definitely see it. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens. Absolutely. Somebody thinks to themselves, I wanna try, I've tried, let's say, the first step of independence, going into a studio and doing it myself, maybe with one or two, friends, partners. And then after a couple years, they think to themselves, I want to try maybe the next step of independent. I want to have my own storefront. And so they'll take a 2,000 square foot space or whatever. And, they do the math and they're like, if I put in another 3 chairs, I can charge XYZ. And then they go do that. It happens. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is definitely a cyclical flow, and that's maybe kind of the fundamental thing that we're drawing a picture about, right? It is a flow, circular in many ways, of the evolution or the cycle of a beauty professional, and the different types of working environments and how those may satisfy the desires of the beauty pro at any point in their career. There's all those different options. And so we are one place on that circle.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to get an idea of the industry, and this industry is terrible for having reliable data. And I suppose part of when I asked you before about, the different suite organizations, I was sort of wondering whether there was some sort of, federation of suite owners or whatever that would share data. I know there isn't, but I think what a lot of people want to try and get a handle on is what percentage of suites fail. And you hear figures bandied about, often that 40% of them fail within the first year. That some people are just not cut out for it. Now, I know you don't have a failure rate like that, but I would believe that some suite owners may very well have a fail rate like that because they don't have any of the sort of support and stuff that I know that you have in place. As an industry, what would you think about that figure? Would you think, yeah, that is very possible, but it's not happening for us? Because I know it's not happening for you, but as an industry, the suite model, would you suggest that there is a big failure rate because people just underestimate what it takes?
So this is the turnover. I call it turnover, not necessarily failure,
Yeah,
because in many cases, one of our beauty professionals, her husband gets transferred to Tennessee,
yeah,
right? So she's doing great in her studio, but she's going to move. This has happened a lot, of course, post COVID. So is she a failure? Absolutely not.
yeah, no, yeah,
She's just a statistician would call it turnover or
yeah,
attrition.
yeah,
So the historical turnover that I'm familiar with is about mid-teens. The historical turnover in the salon industry in general, including normal salons, is about 30% per year. So what we've experienced is about half of the turnover of what a typical salon experiences. And of the, let's call it mid-teens percentage, sure, there is a percentage of those who it didn't work. They couldn't handle the freedom, right? They were irresponsible for some reason, or they moved in, they didn't have the book of business, or whatever other reason. There's a percentage of that mid-teens number that falls into that failure category, and there's a percentage that doesn't. I have no idea what that percentage is.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Listen, I always enjoy chatting with you and talking about all this
Same.
stuff. Thank you for being so open and honest, and sharing your thoughts on the industry. Where can people connect with you on Instagram or your other social channels? I know you don't seem to be as active these days as what you used to be, but for people who aren't familiar with Salon Republic and want to see what it is that I'm talking about, where should they go?
Well, they could go to Salon Republic on Instagram. They can go to salonrepublic.com. I am Love Eric Taylor on Instagram. And as you just said, I haven't posted. I mean, it might be 6 weeks since I posted.
Okay.
I have that guilt that
Yeah.
everybody has, nowadays with social media. If you haven't posted in a while, my Instagram is still a great place to see what I'm doing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the Professional Beauty Federation of California. I've been the chair of that since COVID, so that's another kind of place where I spend some time. But I would say my Instagram first, Love Eric Taylor, and then if you want to delve into Salon Republic, it's just Salon Republic.
Cool. Okay. Well, look, I'll put those links on our website, growmysalonbusiness.com, and in the show notes for today's podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast with Eric Taylor and have enjoyed it, do me a favor and share it to people who you know would also enjoy it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app. So to wrap up, Eric, thank you for being on this week's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Always great to talk to you. I love it. Always.
Cheers. Thanks, man.